In those early days, we couldn't have entered the market without the partners, without having IBM and Apple and Commodore selling our services. We didn't have the money to do it on our own. But even in the later years, we had hundreds of partners. It was shifted from the PC companies to the network companies to software companies to content companies to startups that we were funding. There are hundreds of companies that were part of the success of AOL. We would not have succeeded without those partnerships. So we moved away from being reliant on one or two to having hundreds of those partners. But I think that dynamic of partnership is going to be critical in this third wave. And I think the mindset of entrepreneurs who understand that of course the software is important, but figuring out a way to build the partnership, which requires building a relationship and building trust, is also going to be important. And that it's going to just require that additional extra effort to really take your idea and move it into the real world.
And AOL had this amazing period, I guess it was like 95 to 2000, where you defined a category. It was called portal deals. And because AOL had so many tens of millions of users, I mean, at the peak, you guys hit 30, 35 million.
Right, 30, I think.
Paying subscribers. And to get people's heads around this, at the time, I think HBO was probably the greatest subscription service out there, maybe 10 million people.
I think it might have been more than that, but they were getting
20?
less money per month because of the way it was working with the cable.
But nobody
system.
was bigger, right? Had anybody ever built a paid subscription service?
Yeah, at the time, I don't think so. Certainly in terms of the overall kind of revenues, both in terms of the subscription revenue and so the commerce and advertising revenues on top of it. Which is why when we went public in 1992 as the first internet company to go public, it was still a lot of skeptics. That roadshow was tough. People saying, well, why is this ever going to amount to anything? And the reality was we'd been at it for 7 years and had 184,000 customers and $30 million of revenue. And the market value of the company was $70 million. We raised $10 million at a $70 million valuation.
It was a huge, also known as an A round or a B round in Silicon Valley today.
No, that's changed. And then we started taking off, and in the next 8 years we went from 184,000, I think it was 30 million, and from a 70 million value to $160 billion value. So the first decade almost was a struggle. The second decade was when we got the benefits of it. And I think that's going to be more the dynamic in this third wave.
It goes a little faster now. Everything's accelerated. It seems like it's compressed. It's a good thing or a bad thing in your mind?
Well, I think it's a good thing that innovation is accelerating. I think it may slow down a bit in this third wave because some of these revolutions will happen in evolutionary ways, and you'll have fewer overnight successes, and it will require the partnerships to get traction, will require understanding the policy to get traction. So the mindset of entrepreneurs that if it doesn't work quickly in the first few months, then you should move on to something else. I think that's going to require a different mindset in the third wave. So the pace of technological change will continue to accelerate. The potential for innovation will continue to accelerate, but you're going to have to add on these additional dynamics around these 3 Ps I talk about, partnership, policy, and perseverance, to really be one of the winners in one of these third wave sectors.
Hey everybody, I want to talk about one of my favorite addictions, Audible. I listen to audiobooks constantly because I love nonfiction, I love learning, and I'm big into bios. So my Audible pick for this month, this week, whatever amount of time it's going to take you to listen to it, I think you listen to it in about a week, is The Man Who Knew Infinity, A Life of the Genius Ramanujan. And this book is amazing. It is about an Indian clerk who is a math genius and who filled 3 or 4 books with math theories and formulas that today inform how we interpret black holes, and a true genius who then went to England to study. And it is being made into a film, which I was lucky enough to just see. And it's got Jeremy Irons and Dave Patel in it. It is an amazing, and Stephen Fry, and just an all-star cast. And I just saw this movie, and it is very powerful and a great, great film. And, making math, interesting, very hard to do. And there's a lot of these people who did seminal, incredible work, and you would never know them. The book is by Robert Kangle, and I actually saw the author speak with the director recently at a screening. And I, immediately when I got invited to the screening, I said to myself, I'm going to go to a screening for this book, but I want to go deeper. I always want to know not just the 90-minute or 120-minute version, but I like to read the original source material, and I like to listen to it. I'm constantly in the car. I'm driving between things. Sometimes I got to take my daughter to a kid's party, and then there's other parents there. I don't want to talk to them, so I pretend I'm on a conference call. Really, I'm listening to an Audible book while the kids are playing. The kids don't want to be involved with the parents, but the parents don't want to talk to me about some crazy nonsense. I just say, I got to go make a phone call. I secretly listen to a little bit of Audible. So go check out The Man Who Knew Infinity. It is an amazing audiobook, and it is going to get my highest recommendation. Of course, if you're not into bios, there are a ton of other interesting books. One I'm reading on my hikes through the NorCal mountains is Amusing Ourselves to Death by Neil Postman, who is I believe a New York University media kind of Marshall McLuhan type professor. And Amusing Ourselves to Death is my backup here. If you want to listen to an amazing book from 1985 about media and media theory and television versus the printed word in newspapers and before that books, and how illiterate and how television has become a huge nonsensical mess. We are actually amusing ourselves to death. If you look at what's happening in this election this year, this is a really interesting book to go back and listen to, especially. And the way I wound up wanting to listening to Amusing Ourselves to Death was I had Keith Raboy at the Launch Festival. You may have heard that episode here. And he just mentioned casually, like when I was asking him about Donald Trump and Cruz and Hillary Clinton and Bernie Sanders, he said, it reminds me of this incredible book, Amusing Ourselves to Death. And I was like, oh yeah, I didn't read that. And this is one of the things I love about audiobooks is, sometimes you get older, you're 30 years old, you're 40 years old, you're 50 years old. You're supposed to have read some books. You're supposed to be an expert. Listen, I'm supposed to be an expert on media and technology. I never read Amusing Ourselves to Death. I may have read a chapter or two when I was younger on the book. And now I have Audible. I listen to it on my hikes. I go for a 2-hour hike. I knock out 2 out of the 7 hours. Boom, I got another hike, wipe out another 2 or 3 hours, go to the gym. I reward myself when I exercise with Audible. I reward myself when I'm driving with Audible. I like to make myself smarter. Thank you so much to our friends at Audible for supporting this episode. Get a free audiobook right now, like The Man Who Knew Infinity or Amusing Ourselves to Death. And you can just go to audible.com/twist, audible.com/twist. Some of my past recommendations, The Hobbit, read by Robert Inglis, is amazing. My daughter and I love listening to that. We've listened to the first 3 chapters over and over again because she likes certain scenes, like when the dwarfs are singing and breaking plates. And then before that, I did Building Great Sentences because you guys know I sold my book and it will be on Audible at some point next year. And I wanted to write better sentences, so I got this Building Great Sentences, and it's really helped me do better sentences in my writing. And you can access your stuff from iPhones, iPad, Android, Windows, all that. What's really interesting is I have an iPad, I have my phone, and a lot of times I'll go from my iPad to my phone and it remembers where I was. So if you forget and my phone died on the hike, then I plugged in my iPad and I was listening on my deck, it remembered where I was and it caught me up when I was listening to Amusing Ourselves to Death. 180,000 titles in every genre, and they're doing some really interesting stuff with channels and podcasting. There's a bunch of stuff going on with Audible that you'll read about in the news. They're just an amazing company. I love it. Download my book of the week for free by signing up at audible.com/twist. You can only get that free book by going to audible.com/TWIST, and they love to see you do that. So make sure you tell your mom, your dad, your cousin, your brother, your sons, your daughters, your friends, your enemies. Tell them to go to audible.com/twist and get a free book. The Man Who Knew Infinity, a great, great listen. And Amusing Ourselves to Death, another great listen. Okay, let's get back to this amazing interview.